So real estate in the UAE, I think it's an ideal place for foreigners because there's no tax. Besides the VAT of 5%, this of course is a great advantage. And what's very impressive, 90% of the population are foreigners. So it's definitely open for foreigners to participate and come to this beautiful country and get all the possibilities in these countries. But what it doesn't have, also if you are 30, 40, 50 years here, you will never get a passport. You are always welcome to be a resident, but you don't get the passport. Now, how was the Corona crisis affecting the real estate prices here? Well, it affected it quite tremendously. Prices have gone up as they have gone down as well in the financial crisis, 2008, 2009. They went down quite a bit and then they went up and recuperated all the losses which were done. And now with the Corona crisis, we see that a certain downsize is taking place, 20, 30, 40% perhaps of some apartments and villas, the prices have gone down. So for many people, it is a great opportunity. And I think it is a little bit something, since I'm already of a certain age, what I have seen, if there are financial crises, very often, so that foreigners definitely have great advantages in the UAE, where it has been attracting 90% of the current population, which are foreigners. So definitely a great advantage. Prices have gone down through the crisis, like they have gone down in the financial crisis of 2008, 2009. Now with the Corona crisis, also the prices have been affected. And many choose now the opportunity to upgrade to better properties. Many, of course, are also waiting and say, well, is this really the right time? And there, I think, looking at my age, where I've gone through a few crises, usually the best moment to invest at a certain moment is when everybody says you shouldn't do anything, you shouldn't do any investments. Usually when everybody says, yeah, now it's great, now it's good, then the prices already have peaked quite a lot. So what we see, definitely UAE is attractive. And what I do recommend, if anybody considers making investments, do not buy off-plan property, which is still just planned or which they started building, but buy property which has been finished, which is ready to move in, or buy property which is already there for a few years, like in the Burj Khalifa or some other great places. The fees here are, well, quite manageable. There is 4% land department registration fee for each shift of property. It must be registered, and the 4% land department fee is to be paid. If it is a shift from the owner, from the parents to the children, then it's 1/8 of a percent or 0.125%, which must be paid. And then usually the broker fee, the brokers, they are charging something like 2%. So I think these are fees which are quite acceptable. And above all, the opportunity now is quite good because the prices have gone down. A great advantage as well of the UAE is that the dirham, the UAE currency, the UAE dirham is linked to the US dollar for about 25 years. So for $1 you get 3.67 dirhams, and that is fixed. That means you don't depend too much on a local currency, but what you risk is the US dollar. That, of course, makes it quite good as an investment, that you think, well, what I have is a US dollar investment. And as you know, the UAE, above all Dubai, have great projects. What they always say is, well, to be at the top, to be a leader in something, you must be unique. Most probably nobody really, or very few people remember the number 2 who was on the moon, but most of the people remember that Armstrong was the first person on the moon. And the same goes with the property. They go for the Burj Khalifa, the tallest tower in the world. They build a palm into the sea, which is 8 kilometers long, and built plenty of apartments and villas on it. So that's really great. Now, how can you buy real estate in the UAE? Well, one way is, of course, as it is possible in all the countries, is you buy it in your personal name. Another possibility would be that you do it through a UAE offshore company. You cannot do it with a company from, let's say, from Dominica or Antigua or the British Virgin Island or Panama. It must be a company from the UAE itself. From, mostly if you buy property in Dubai, it should be a Dubai company. Then it's also possible to do it with special purpose vehicle, SPVs. They are done in the Dubai International Financial Center. The Dubai International Financial Center is the place where all the international banks are. And it has also a court which is under common law, which is a great advantage, and everything is in English. A great advantage of the UAE in general is, with having 90% of foreigners, of course, it has attracted plenty of English speakers, and the language, the most language which you hear is English. Then, of course, you also hear the languages from India or Pakistan, and a lot as well you hear Russian. Russian speakers, there are many here, because they are in a, more or less, so many are in a similar time zone as the UAE. Flight connections, unfortunately, right at the moment are still a little bit limited, but flights to other countries have opened up. The UAE at the moment has about 60 flight destinations, which is quite impressive considering the crisis, the worldwide crisis, which affects worldwide traveling for everybody. So that is one thing, but of course the natural language, the language of the country itself is Arabic. But me, for example, I live now since 2004 in the UAE. My Arabic, because I lived in other Arabic countries at that time, was better than now, because now I just don't have the chance to speak Arabic, because everybody speaks English and prefers to speak English. Another new possibility is also to own the property in the form of a foundation. A foundation, this is a great advantage. So where you can put it in it, and it's not you're not the owner anymore, but it's the foundation who owns the property, which of course then puts away the problems which you would have in case of inheritance if somebody passes away. And since we are speaking about inheritance, well, inheritance in the UAE is rather complex, I have to say. There are quite a few issues with it. A major thing, of course, is we are in an Arabic-speaking country, so the courts itself, the UAE courts, the main courts, they are in Arabic. Only the courts in the financial centers, like the Dubai International Financial Center, or the Abu Dhabi Global Market, with their English is the common law, the language for everybody, and the judges speak and write in English. But otherwise, it's in Arabic. And of course, Sharia law would also apply, because the country is a Muslim country where Sharia law is the main law which applies for everybody, also for inheritance matters. And usually in the past, the first instance court always applied Sharia law also for non-Muslims, which of course for certain people is not so attractive, thinking that in Sharia law, if somebody passes away, the daughter would only receive half as much as a son would receive. That, of course, many wonder, is this really the way I would like to have it? Well, if they appealed in the court, then usually it would be possible in the appeal court to get it that the foreign law is applied. But thanks God, it is now possible since 2015 that non-Muslims, Christians or other religions, can register a will at the DIFC Will registry at the Dubai International Financial Center. And there, with that will, you have financial freedom somehow as well, but you have testamentary freedom. You can assign the ones who the beneficiaries the way you want, and you don't have to follow the Sharia law. It is based on common law principles, which are of course tested in all the common law countries, and everything is in English, which is a great advantage. Me running a law firm here in the UAE, we have certain experience with the DIFC code for the non-Muslim DIFC wills, but we also have experiences for people who didn't do such a DIFC will, who passed away and they didn't have such a will, and it went to the normal courts. There it was quite a restrictive and it took a long time to find a good solution for the judge so that he could decide it. That it could take up to 2, 3, 4, or even 5 years. So definitely it's a recommendation to have a DIFC will where you have the testamentary freedom. But I have to point out, this is only for non-Muslims who have never been Muslim before. So if, for example, a Muslim would say, well, I'm not feeling anymore like a Muslim, I'm not a Muslim, in front of a DIFC court, whether it's the DIFC court or even the UAE normal court, you're always considered a Muslim. You cannot stop being it. And a great advantage, as we have seen in the Caribbean, they're also adapting to the situation. One way of adapting here is that it is now possible to do the signing of the DIFC will with a video conference. So you don't need to go to the court, to the DIFC will registry to sign it. So you can do it with form of a video conference. You don't even need to be in the UAE. This might perhaps be interesting for anybody who currently owns some properties, some apartments and villas, who thinks, well, how will be my future, that they could set up such a will, and the fees are also quite reasonable. These wills are also flexible for other things, so you can have the bank accounts in it, Dubai offshore companies, house, apartment in Dubai. The guardianship is also very important, that you can sort it in the will, because if it goes according to Sharia law, then usually if the husband passes away, it's not the mother, the wife who gets it, the guardianship. Usually that will go to the brother of him or somebody of his family. So that could be quite a lengthy time and difficult to arrange till the mother still finally gets the guardianship again. So that's another reason to have a DIFC will. And with this will, you can have anything in the world, bank accounts in London or a company in Mauritius to have property in India. All other possibilities are open. Another new rule which has come and is enforced worldwide is that you need to have substance for companies. You need to have substance in the form of offices for the income generating activities, that you need to have employees, that the management must be in that location, board meetings must be held in that location, in that country. So that is a major difference. And this difference, this push, this pressure comes from the European Union, from the OECD as well, which said we need to have that it goes through the system, that companies like Amazon, like Microsoft, like many Googles and so on, who make billions of profits in Europe, but nearly don't pay any taxes there, because they are allocated somewhere in a Caribbean island, the Isle of Man, or perhaps in some other offshore jurisdiction where they are supposed to pay tax, but since they don't have any tax in those places, they don't pay at all. So therefore, the European Union said, no, companies need to have substance in the form of offices, employees, management must be around. And since, of course, they cannot be discriminatory and say, okay, we just do that for the big companies, they had to do that for all companies. So these days, worldwide, companies need to have substance. This started this year. It's quite a surprise for many, perhaps also some of the listeners. And therefore, I took the opportunity to mention it, because in some small island, in wherever it is, of course, difficult to have offices for 100,000 companies or more, as they have perhaps register their companies. And they also have very often employment restrictions. You cannot just put 10,000, 5,000, 100,000 foreigners on an island which perhaps has only population of 20,000. And this is a great advantage for the UAE, and this we also see is a main reason where we see now the property prices start to go up, because international companies are now looking around. Where can we go? Where should we go and be located? Where can we have substance? And the UAE is indeed an ideal place to have substance, because here you can easily have offices. You can have small offices, you can have as big as office as you want, you can have a whole tower for your company if it is needed, with offices accommodating a few thousand people. All this is possible. Then it is also that you can have foreigners. Foreigners are welcome. As I pointed out at the beginning, 90% of the population in the UAE are foreigners already. So it doesn't matter for them whether it will be 95% or whatever percentage. Everybody is welcome. It doesn't make a difference where you come from. And perhaps also a great advantage with it is, since they're all foreigners, in certain countries, or for example, for me, coming from Switzerland, these days there's a lot talking about racism, making difference from each nationality and so on. I would say, well, also in Switzerland, we have that. But me being now and having lived in 10 different countries in the Caribbean, in Africa and other places, now being in the UAE, I realize here is the place where I don't feel that at all, because we're all foreigners anyway. So we cannot make any difference and say, hey, this one is better or that one is worse. And that makes it very comfortable to be in this country. And there are no employment restriction. And of course, a main advantage for a company to decide where we go is, of course, the tax situation. It doesn't make sense to move to a country which is beautiful and great if the tax is too high. And the UAE, in this case, definitely is a great place, because you don't pay any taxes besides the VAT value-added tax of 5%. And a good advantage also for companies to move here, and for anybody who comes here also as a private person, there are more than 90 double tax treaties. More than 90 double tax treaties, which is a great advantage. And for anybody who has been in the UAE, I guess we all agree the infrastructure is well developed and is great. And a main attraction also is for companies who want to send international people here with the family, that they can say, well, there are more than 200 private schools. So there are Russian schools, there are Indian schools, there are German schools, French schools, all these possibilities. So you find definitely a curriculum also for your kids here. And it's a safe place. It's a safe place to be here. And main advantage, since I mentioned this substance thing, is also since about 2-3 years, it's possible to migrate companies. So it's possible to migrate companies. So if you have, for example, a company somewhere in the British Virgin Islands, which is home for about 500,000 companies, and you say, well, perhaps I want to move to another location, this is now possible. You can migrate the company to the UAE. So it's still the same company. It has the same track record. The bank accounts, which these days are so difficult to open, they're still the same. And you just move to Dubai, to one of the free zones, or even to a local company. The same track record stays, but the address has changed now. You are in the UAE, and it's also possible to upgrade the company. So if it was before an offshore company, it becomes a real company with employees, with offices, all these advantages it offers. So it has the same legal entity, it is the same legal entity, and since it is the same legal entity, it also means that the contracts remain the same. You don't have to change the contracts, which is very important. For example, if you would change the contracts now in these difficult times like Corona, I could imagine that perhaps the other part of the contract says, well, that's now a great opportunity to start contract discussions again and to see whether we really want to have it this way. But with the migration of a company, the same contracts continue to stay. So this is really great, so that you can be removed from the old jurisdiction and you're registered in the new jurisdiction, and you get also with it, by living here, by working here, you get residence. And as we have seen before, as I mentioned, here all the nationalities are welcome and can get a residence thing. I can also say the opportunities in this country, also in the real estate sector, is really great. Here you see a photo of the Swiss Tower. As I pointed out, I'm Swiss. I'm here now since 2004. And in 2004, it showed what you really can do. Yeah, we were a few people together from the Swiss Business Council, and we said, hey, everybody builds towers. Why don't we build a Swiss tower? And after a few more beers, we said, well, build the tallest Swiss tower in the world. And we did it. We built the tallest Swiss tower in the world. And this shows the possibilities you have in this country, which also shows now with the infrastructure so well developed, we see that the investors, people who say, where shall we invest money? Of course, you can invest in the usual stock markets anywhere in the world. Real estate wise, well, do you want to invest in the real estate that currently in London? Well, perhaps some people say, well, with Brexit and so on, it's not the ideal time. But definitely what we see, it's a great opportunity for investors to invest here in the UAE, because everybody is welcome. An investment into real estate, the transfer from one owner to the other or buying completely new usually takes about 2 to 4 weeks, and then you are the owner of a property. And being an owner of the property, you can also get residence. So that's another possibility of getting residence in this country, which has plenty of opportunities. Well, this brings me to the end of my presentation.